Aircraft carriers are symbols of American military might, and recently a Chinese military professor caused a stir by calling for China to sink 2 of them to crush America's resolve. Nobody really doubts the utility of large-deck carriers. Large-deck, nuclear-powered aircraft carriers are the signature expression of American military power. There's nothing else like them, and the United States is the only nation that operates a fleet big enough to keep 3 or more carriers continuously deployed at all times. Before starting the video, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to never miss out on any of our videos. Today's aircraft carrier flight operations are as much a product of their history and continuity of operation as of their design. The Navy has begun taking delivery of a new class of aircraft carriers, providing even better protection than the already formidable Nimitz class, which comprises the current fleet. For instance, the Ford class will provide over 600 megawatts of electricity to power onboard sensors, networks, and warfighting systems. The added power may one day facilitate the installation of high-power lasers, electromagnetic railguns, and other exotic weapons for which enemies currently have no counters. So although nobody should doubt the sacrifices of sailors and aviators serving on America's large deck, nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, the danger of losing one to hostile action is modest and receding. You might be safer on a carrier in wartime than you would be in your hometown, which is far more vulnerable to a variety of aggressive acts. Nimitz-class carriers of the type that dominate the current fleet, like the Ford-class carriers that will replace them, are the biggest warships ever built. They have 25 decks standing 250 feet in height and displace 100,000 tons of water. With hundreds of watertight compartments and thousands of tons of armor, no conventional torpedo or mine is likely to cause serious damage. And because carriers are constantly moving when deployed at up to 35 miles per hour, fast enough to outrun submarines, finding and tracking them is difficult. Within 30 minutes after sighting by enemies, the area within which a carrier might be operating has grown to 700 square miles. After 90 minutes, it has expanded to 6,000 square miles. Despite their huge size, Nimitz-class carriers and the Ford-class carriers that will replace them are unlimited in their reach thanks to nuclear propulsion. Their operations will not be disrupted if fuel tankers servicing the rest of the fleet are intercepted. Nuclear power enables the carriers to execute deceptive maneuvers in any direction for any duration, far exceeding the range of most hostile forces struggling to find them. The US military conducted a sync exercise test in 2005 using the decommissioned USS America for target practice to test the defensive capabilities of US carriers in order to guide the development of future supercarriers. The ship was bombarded repeatedly and hammered in a variety of attacks. The carrier withstood 4 weeks of intense bombardment before it was finally sunk, according to the war zone. These leviathans of the seas are beacons of American power for a reason. China could knock one of the US's 11 carriers out of the fight, but sinking one of these 100,000-ton warships is another thing entirely. That's not to say it can't be done. US aircraft carriers are equipped with extensive active and passive defenses for defeating threats such as low-flying cruise missiles and hostile submarines. These include an array of high-performance sensors, radar-guided missiles, and 20mm Gatling guns that shoot 50 rounds per second. The carrier air wing of 60-plus aircraft includes a squadron of early warning radar planes that can detect approaching threats, including radar periscopes over vast distances and helicopters equipped for anti-submarine, anti-surface, and counter-mine warfare. All of the carrier's defensive sensors and weapons are netted together through an onboard command center for coordinated action against adversaries. The Navy has spent decades figuring out how to connect all of its scattered warfighting assets into a single integrated network, so deployed carriers won't just be relying on their organic sensors to detect threats. They'll receive continuous information from the surface and undersea warships, from manned and unmanned aircraft, and even from orbiting Renaissance satellites. Not only will the carrier have a detailed awareness of potential dangers, but it will be able to use weapons on remote warships to intercept threats that may be beyond the reach of its onboard systems. Because of the high turnover rate, a US aircraft carrier will begin its workup with a large percentage of new hands in the crew, and with a high proportion of officers new to the ship. The US Navy's tradition of training generalist officers, which distinguishes it from the other military services, assures that many of them will also be new to their specific jobs. Furthermore, tours of duty are not coordinated with ship sailing schedules, hence the continual replacement of experience with green personnel in critical as well as routine jobs continues even during periods of actual deployment. The continual rotation creates the potential for confusion and uncertainty even in relatively standardized military organizations. Lewis Sorley has characterized the effects of constant turnover in other military systems as turbulence and has identified it as the prime source of loss of unit cohesion. It wouldn't be impossible to hit an aircraft carrier, but unless they hit it with a nuke, an aircraft carrier should be able to take on substantial damage, said retired Captain Talbot Manville, who previously served as an aircraft carrier engineer and was involved in the design of the new Ford-class carriers. At 1,100 feet long, carriers are floating nuclear power plants, fuel tankers, bomb arsenals, and an airfield stacked atop each other like a layered cake. They are then surrounded by cruisers and destroyers to defend them from missiles, fighters, and torpedoes, even if that means sacrificing themselves. Although U.S. aircraft carriers are protected by the most potent, multi-layered defensive shield ever conceived, they don't take chances when deployed near potential adversaries. Their operational tactics have evolved to minimize risk while still delivering the offensive punch that is their main reason for existing. For instance, a carrier will generally not operate in areas where mines might have been laid until the area has been thoroughly cleared. It will tend to stay in the open ocean rather than entering confined areas where approaching threats are hard to sort out from other local traffic. It will keep moving to complicate the targeting challenge for enemies. It will also use links to other joint assets from the SEAD to low Earth orbit to achieve detailed situational awareness. Whether they're traveling to the Western Pacific or the Persian Gulf or the North Sea, US carriers never deploy without escorts. These included multiple surface combatants equipped with the world's most advanced air and missile defenses, plus nuclear-powered attack subs that are unsurpassed in their ability to find and destroy hostile warships on or under the sea surface. The surface warships are being upgraded with a new generation of weapons for intercepting overhead threats and a radar 100 times more powerful than the legacy system. The submarines are continuously improved to stay ahead of undersea rivals such as the Russian Navy, displacing more than 100,000 tons. The US Navy's Nimitz-class aircraft carriers are among the largest warships ever built. Their ability to take a beating is a function of both their size and compartmentalization of the carrier, Clark explained. In the case of the USS America, the size alone resulted in it being pretty survivable, he said before calling attention to some other aspects of the powerful ships. Although there has been much speculation about emerging threats to aircraft carriers, the Navy invests heavily in new offensive and defensive technologies aimed at countering such dangers. The most important advance of recent years has been the netting together of all naval assets in an area so that sensors and weapons can be used to maximum effect. Initiatives like the Naval Integrated Fire Control Counter-Air Program link together every available combat system in a seamless, fast-reacting defensive screen that few adversaries can penetrate. Numerous other advances are being introduced, from the penetrating recon capabilities of stealthy fighters to shipboard jamming systems to advanced obscurants that confuse the guidance systems of homing missiles. Because of their vast size, US aircraft carriers have hundreds of watertight compartments. Given enough time and weapons, you can sink a carrier, but if you have defenses, people doing damage control, and propulsion, the carrier can take damage and drive away to eventually come back, Clark told BI. They also have thousands of tons of armor and redundancy built into major onboard systems, such as the electrical wiring, so that one weapon that might penetrate a layered defense isn't likely to do great damage to the carrier. The vessel won't sink, and the crew will probably be able to work around whatever damage is incurred to continue performing their mission. The size of the carrier that some pundits fear make it vulnerable to attack actually make it more resilient than any other warship.